Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our next Learn at Home webinar in our fantastic series of webinars that we have been offering since May of 2020. We are nearly at 1 year of webinars on Tuesday evenings. My name is Kate Venturini. I am pleased to welcome you on behalf of the University of Rhode Island College of the Environment and Life Sciences, and also Cooperative Extension, which I participate as an educator in, as does my colleague here, Allison. We're in really good hands tonight. We're going to learn all about being a smart well owner, and I'll let Allison do all the talking on that. But very excited to have her back. Really lucky. Um, so, just a little bit, we always take this opportunity to make sure everyone in the world, everyone who's on these webinars knows what cooperative extension is. So for those of you who aren't familiar yet, cooperative extension is actually a unit that exists at every land grant institution in the United States. So in Rhode Island, URI is the land grant institution, and that basically means that we have a three-pronged mission, which is not only to do research and teach students, but also to make sure that the information that's generated through the university system is extended out into the community to help people solve problems. And so this session tonight, our Learn at Home webinar on water resources, is part of our effort to make sure that folks have science-based information to help them solve problems. So obviously tonight's program falls pretty squarely within our water resources strategic area focus. We also do work in land stewardship, food systems and agriculture, energy, and healthy lifestyles. And just to say, this COVID pandemic has created a very interesting opportunity for us, which is that I know for myself and the programs that I'm involved in, we never used technology the way we do now. And so I think it's actually been a bit of a silver lining, and we're able to reach more people bringing these programs to you while you sit on the couch at your house. So we're really happy about that. And the reason I bring this up here is that we'd ask that you share information about this and other webinar programs that we offer with your friends and family, especially folks who may not know what extension is. We are a publicly funded entity, and so we're here for you. So just a couple of housekeeping items. As I mentioned to some of you who were here early on in the program, there are 3 white dots in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you click on those 3 dots, a little one-item menu will pop up that says Q&A. And if you click on that, that is where we would love for you to enter questions for Allison as she goes through her talk. We will answer all of those questions after her presentation, and that'll be great. Also, we will automatically send you an email. It will probably come through from Messenger at WebEx. So look out for that because it has a link to a survey in it. And Allison is actually our poster child for program evaluation. So I will say on both of our behalf that we collect data to measure the effectiveness of these programs on people's knowledge. And so we can only do that if you fill the survey out. So no pressure. But thank you in advance for opening that email from Messenger at URI, clicking the survey and completing it. And I do believe also you'll receive another survey from Allison and her grad student, Joe, for that express purpose. So thanks in advance. And lastly, this session is being recorded for better or for worse. And it will be posted as a recording on our URI Cooperative Extension YouTube channel, which you can find via a search engine. All of the recordings are actually closed captioned for the hearing impaired and posted under their strategic area of focus they relate to. So you'll be able to find this one under water resources. And so while I transition here to Allison sharing her screen, which I think might already be up, I would just remind everybody to use that Q&A box. And I'd love to introduce my dear colleague and fellow West Greenwich resident, Allison McCann, to talk to you about being curious about your well water. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for joining us tonight. In addition, Kate said you'll get an email from us. You will. After the program, Joe will be sending you an email that will have a PDF of my slide presentation. So you'll have all of the information that I'm presenting. You can sit back and listen and digest the information. And in the slide presentation are a number of links and et cetera, that I'll be referring to. So everything is put together for you here, and you will get a copy of it. I like to say it's smart to be curious about your well water. You see my contact information there in front of you a number of times today. This evening, I'm going to say, please reach out and contact me if you have questions. That's what I'm here for. I provide education and technical assistance to Rhode Island private well owners, either by phone or email, whatever's most convenient for you. And I've also listed my colleague Shannon Nakama with the Rhode Island Department of Health, the private well program. I work very closely with both the Department of Health and the Rhode Island State Health Laboratories in this effort. So, see if I can get my slides to advance. Thank you to the Learn at Home series. Here's some information repetitive of what, just reiterating what Kate had said. I really appreciate being here and being able to present to you in the comfort of your own home, although I do miss seeing you in person. Usually these programs are at local libraries and town halls and things like that. But as Kate mentioned, this has been a silver lining. People can join from their own home and don't have to go out in the evening. So this has been really a good, a silver lining to what's been happening. Tonight, I'm going to talk about protecting, testing, and treating private wells. I'm going to address and answer many of the frequently asked questions that we've received over the years about private well water protection. Full disclosure, I am a private well owner, and the responsibility for protecting, testing, and treating our drinking water wells is our own. And so I know that there's a lot of questions out there about how do I do this? What do test results mean? How do I shop for treatment? How do I know what kind of treatment system is needed to address the concerns that I have? So I'm going to touch the surface of many of these. And then again, if you have specific questions, you can put them in the chat. And also you can call and email me. So groundwater is the source of your well water. And we put our wells down into the groundwater so that they can pump water to our homes for our use. Now, groundwater is part of the water cycle, right? As precipitation, rainfall, snow melt, snow falls to the earth, it can seep down through the soil and it can infiltrate down into the soil and recharge our groundwater system. And much like a battery, groundwater needs to be recharged. It needs to be replenished from rainfall and snow melt. And so even though I know some people, don't necessarily like the rain, I never complain about the rain because I know that we need it for our drinking water wells. Groundwater is always moving. So it's moving from areas of recharge, land surfaces that allow water to move down through the soil to areas of discharge. And those discharge areas in this slide are being noted as labeled as surface water. It can be the wetland in your backyard. It could be the, the river that you like to take hikes next to on the weekends. It can be Narragansett Bay. It can be the Atlantic Ocean, depending on where you live in the state. So it's moving from areas of recharge to areas of discharge, and our wells are placed down into the groundwater so it can capture the movement of this underground water bring it into our home for our use. We put our wells into one of two different formations underground. The first one that I'll mention is bedrock. It's labeled as number 2 in the slide here. We put bedrock. Wells can be drilled down into the bedrock, and then that well can intercept the movement of groundwater through the cracks and fractures that exist in the bedrock. And the second kind of formation is in sand and gravel deposits. That's labeled as number 1 in the graphic down below on the slide. And sand and gravel is capable of holding, storing the groundwater and then also releasing that water to a water supply well. Wells that are placed into sand and gravel deposits typically are shallower than wells that are drilled into bedrock. And that's simply because the sand and gravel sits atop of our bedrock deposits. The water table is labeled in this slide, and what that simply means is that the water table is the boundary of the saturated zone or the groundwater resource below and the unsaturated zone above it, that's within the soil. So the water table is simply that boundary marker between the groundwater resource and then, if you will, the non-groundwater resource. I'm going to talk in just a moment about different kinds of well construction. Often people will scratch their head about the type of well that they have and the characteristics of well types. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Depending on the type of formation, whether it's bedrock or sand and gravel, can dictate the type of well construction that you would have. The water quality in our private wells is typically affected by one of two things or both of these things, okay? The first is what we do in and around our own home, okay? So here you're looking at somebody filling their lawnmower. I like to say the way that we use, store, and dispose of hazardous products in and around the home. In this case, the example would be gasoline. Thinking about where this gasoline that's used, to run the lawnmower or other motorized equipment around your home, how is it stored? How do you use it? Where do you fill the lawnmower? Is it, is gas being spilled while you're filling the lawnmower? Where's the well in proximity to this? And then how do you dispose of? We talk about well water protection. What I'm talking about is learning about where the well is located on your property, what is going on around the well, so taking an inventory. Of course, I'm going to give you some homework in a little bit. What type of well you have, and what the water test results mean. So first of all, where is the well located in the yard? This is just a very simple snapshot of the well circled in red on the photograph on the right-hand side of your screen. And then as you look at this location, what kinds of things may be of concern, just looking at what's happening. Remember, let's start with directly in and around the well itself. And so Some of the things that may come to my mind here as I look at this slide is the location of the well. You know, what's happening. See, now that just happened and I did not touch my slides.
That was me because
Oh,
your
okay, good.
slides
I'm
aren't
glad. I thought
advancing.
it was like some weird vibe that's here at night at URI that I wasn't aware of. Okay, so where is the well located in the yard? You know, it's in the middle of a lawn. You'll see in just a little bit that this is actually the best practice. Is you know, for the well to be in a situation like this. But the kinds of things that I would ask is, what are the lawn care practices? What kind of products might be put, whether they be insecticides, pesticides, fertilizers, on the lawn? How close are they to applied to the well? And could they possibly have an impact on the well, on the drinking water quality? Okay, so that would be one thing. And then on the left-hand side of that snapshot, you have, you know, some vehicles. One of that white truck is up on some blocks there, you know, it might be in some disrepair. And it looks like the slides are moving again.
So Allison, it's not advancing the slides when you do it. So I'm not actually sure which slide we should be on. And you know what I think we should do? I will share them just so that we can make sure folks can see what you want them to see, if that's okay. I'm
Yeah,
not sure why that's happening, but I can show them right from here. So
okay.
let's see. I'm going to share.
Oh,
How's that?
yep. So go
So
ahead,
we'll
keep
go forward.
advancing. I'll tell you when to stop.
Okay,
Right there, Kate. Thank
great.
you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
so what kind of car work, you know, automotive work is happening in this particular situation? Where are products stored? How are they disposed of? Again, that same kind of questioning. Use, storage, and disposal of potentially household products. And then next slide, please. Where is the well located? Where's your home located in the neighborhood? So here's a bird's eye view. These snapshots were taken, you know, off of Google Maps. So you can do this at home in terms of the neighborhood. And so here's the red arrow is pointing to that location that we just looked at. And so you can see that it's on a dead-end street. There's a cul-de-sac. There's not a lot of homes, so it's not densely developed. It's mostly residential. You can also see that there's a little bit of development just to the downside of that red arrow. So what's happening there? What kind of development is going in? More homes? Are they on septic systems? When I talk about testing in just a moment, I will get, you will see that many of the items that are in the suggested yearly test for private well owners are substances that that neighborhood land use, you know, what we do in and around our own home and what's happening in our own neighborhood, those substances are on the annual test. So when people start asking me, geez, I'm concerned about whether my septic system may be an issue for my drinking water quality, or, you know, the neighbor's dog might be an issue for my drinking water quality. We'll talk about on the annual test how the results of those can help you to answer those questions. Next slide, please. So there are some minimum setback distances of private wells from common potential sources of contamination. So here's the well in the middle, and if you just advance through this, Kate, you'll see that the well should be sited 50 feet from a sewer line, 25 feet from a road surface, 50 feet from the septic tank, or the you know, the part of the septic system where solids are settling out. and 100 feet from animals and the septic system drain field. Okay, and in the animal piece, I'm showing a horse. Not all of us have horses, I'm sure, but many of us have dogs, have our pets. And so, where's the dog kennel? Where's the dog? If the dog has a run out in the yard, where is the run out in the yard? I worked with a homeowner a number of years ago where there was some issues with nitrates and bacteria in the private well. And in interacting with this gentleman, came to find out that the well was also fenced into the enclosure that the dog went out to. So I had suggested to him, why don't you move the dog enclosure and get it out of the well area, and that helped to minimize the bacteria and nitrate issue that he had in his well water over the course of time. So can be simple things like that. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the earlier slide, we do suggest that low maintenance grass is best around the wellhead. If you just click, there's some animation next, Kate, yeah. And so it's best, we don't recommend decorative coverings, dense plants and shrubbery that hide the well, in case around the well. We like for homeowners to be able to see the well, be reminded that they have a well, to occasionally go out and inspect the well. When it's got a decorative covering over it or being hidden by plants, out of sight, out of mind, it also can help to encourage, or may encourage, rodents to burrow or live around, nest around the wellhead, which, rodents can I've worked with many a homeowner where there's been, a mouse in the well, or, a nesting near the well, and some of the components like the electrical line or something like that could be gnawed upon. Some of the aerators in the well, maybe the screens could be gnawed by rodents and things like that. So it's best to just keep it open, and every once in a while inspect it. And I'll do a visual inspection, and I'll talk about that as part of your homework in a little bit. Okay. Next slide. So let's talk about different kinds of well types. There's 3 main types of well construction. The first type is that I'll talk about is a drilled well. This is the most commonly put in type of well construction, typically in areas where our drinking water is supplied by bedrock, the cracks, water moving through cracks and fractures in the bedrock. These wells can be very deep. They can be anywhere from 100 feet deep to, geez, one of my neighbors has a bedrock well that's over 500 feet deep. And what you're looking at here at that in the drilled well photograph is the steel casing, the metal casing that's coming up out of the ground. That casing is going to be at least 18 feet in length. So the driller is going to start drilling, into the bedrock, is going to go down into the bedrock at a certain depth, and then has to go down an additional 5 feet once they hit bedrock and seal that metal casing into the bedrock, okay? And then below that 18 feet of casing, you would have just an open borehole, just an open circular borehole that allows the cracks that exist in the bedrock to feed water into your borehole. And the depth of the well, of a drilled well, is going to be dictated by how productive those cracks and fractures transmitting water are. So the more productive they are, the higher the yield of the well, and the less deep your well has to be, okay? In order for you to have enough water in that well to run your home during the busiest parts of the day, right? In the morning when everybody's getting up and, well, we used to go to school and we used to go to work, but now we do all those things from home. But that's the idea behind it. And then at the end of the day, when we're busy, you know, showering or washing dishes and making dinner and all of those sorts of things. So making sure that there's enough water in the home, okay? You'll notice here that there's a well cap on the top of this drilled well. That's very important for all of these wells. And the blue line that you see coming up from above ground is the electrical line running from your home underground and then coming up and going down into the well to run the pump, the submersible pump that's sitting in the well, okay? A driven well is on the top right-hand side of your screen. This type of well construction is put into sand and gravel. Notice that the pipe that's going, well, it's sitting in some concrete casing, and then the actual wellhead is, you're looking down upon it. You're seeing the horizontal line, which is the water line going into the house, and the vertical piece is actually the wellhead. This is about a 3-inch diameter pipe coming up out of the ground, put into sand and gravel, driven by machine into sand and gravel. And these wells tend to be less deep, maybe 75 feet deep at the greatest. Sand and gravel deposits have the capability of producing a lot of water, and they can hold, sand and gravel can hold a lot of water and supply a lot of water to a water supply to your home. So the depth, it's less of an issue in terms of having a big reservoir in your yard like you do, as I spoke about with the drilled well. And then the dug well is shown here at the bottom. It is dug by machine, or, you know, back before heavy machinery, it was dug by hand. Here it's lined with precast concrete. Older properties may have it lined with fieldstone, brick. I've seen them lined with brick, and they're much shallower. They are put into sand and gravel deposits, and they're probably about 30 feet deep. And when you open up the cover of a dug well and look inside, you actually see the groundwater. So typically with a dug well, the groundwater is very close to the surface. It's not 50 plus feet below the surface of the ground. It's very close to the surface of the ground, the top of the water table that I showed you in that slide previously. So different types of well construction, typically dictated by the type of geologic formation that the well is being placed into. Okay, next slide, please. What's important about all of these types of well construction are these similarities. The wellhead is at least 18 inches above the ground. That's so that in time of lots of water, lots of rain, snow melt, the well doesn't flood and surface water doesn't get into the well and potentially introduce bacteria into the well. The well cap is on tight and it's sealed so that nothing from the surface can get in, critters can't get in, ideally insects can't get in. The well casing, or the piping that you just saw on that previous slide, sticking up above the ground, is grouted with a watertight seal between the well casing and the ground. That watertight seal is typically created with like a bentonite clay mixture that the driller puts in when they're installing the well, okay? As best you can, the well is located away from potential pollution sources. When a well is put in, the driller fills out what's called a well completion report and submits that to the Rhode Island Department of Health and the homeowner. This does not always happen. If you bought a home, an existing home with a private well, you may not have had the previous owner maybe didn't transfer the well completion report to you. You can, if you know who the well contractor was, contact that person and see if they can supply you with a copy of the well completion report. Or you can contact the Rhode Island Department of Health. I have Grace Clancy at Rhode Island Department of Health, her phone number, and you can give her a call and she will need your address in town and she'll look it up for you. And if she has a copy, she'll email that to you. And then also there's a URL here for the rules and regulations for new well construction and existing well repair that are new through the Rhode Island Department of Health. Next slide, please. For new well construction, this is part of those new regulations. There is a minimum, so if you're putting in a new well, there's a recommended minimum well depth depending on the yield of the well. So you can see that if the, if the well is yielding 5 gallons per minute or GPM, then the well can be 100 feet or less. And that is recommended and be able to supply enough water for your family at those peak times of the day. And then if we go all the way to the bottom of that chart, you'll see at a 0.5 gallon a minute, it's 450 feet minimum well depth. Again, so you have that reservoir during high peak times. Next slide, please. So I'd like to show this picture because this is, what fractures in bedrock look like. This is just a snapshot of a area in my neighborhood that I like to walk in. And so this is a road cut, right? A new road went in. This is the road cut. So it's exposed. However, if this is what it looks like under the soil in your backyard where your well is, you can see that when I talk about fractures and cracks in the bedrock, I'm not talking about big underground caves that exist in some places of the country, like Kentucky, right, where there's different kinds of different kind of geology. I'm talking about, hair width fractures that the water is traveling through. And so many of us who have bedrock wells, this is where your drinking water is coming from. So I think it's a good visual. Next slide, please, Kate. When you're hiring a well contractor, you want to make sure that that your contractor is licensed and insured. The Rhode Island Contractors Registration and Licensing Board does license well contractors, and you can contact them and they can supply you, with a list of the most recent licensed contractors. You can also ask your contractor if they're licensed and insured. But if you're interested in double checking, it would be the Contractors Registration and Licensing Board that actually does that work in the state. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about testing. This is the well testing schedule that was developed by the Rhode Island Department of Health. It's not a have to. There's one situation in which private wells do need to be tested. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But this is a suggested schedule based on, what some of the, I'm going to say, common issues are in private wells. So, and I use the word common not to mean that everybody has these issues, but that when we see issues in substances in private wells that can cause problems, these are the ones that we see. Okay, so every year there's a list of items that are all about discerning whether or not the water is, the well is sanitary. So these are some common items that also can be byproducts of very common things that we do in and around our homes. So, you know, wastewater, byproducts of septic systems, byproducts. Sometimes people may be concerned about how they're, you know, the kinds of practices that they're using on their lawn for lawn and garden care. Items like nitrates and nitrite can help us to discern, you know, levels of those in drinking water if they exist in the in the well water, can help us to discern whether or not, you know, yard care, lawn care may be an issue around that. Color can help us to determine if additional testing needs to be done, and if so, what that might be. Okay, if somebody were to say to me, I have this like reddish orangey stain in my drinking water, and the color, you know, that's a very visual thing for us to note, then that would lead me to suggest, you know, considering a 3 to 5 year test where that red orangey color could potentially be iron, naturally occurring iron in the well water. Turbidity is a measure of cloudy water. You know, when we take a glass of water out of the tap, we expect it to be odorless, tasteless, but pretty tasteless, and clear, and colorless. So when people call me and tell me that they've noticed a change in the odor, taste, or color of their water, I would go through a series of questions to help to discern and narrow down maybe what would be the next step for testing. And chloride and sodium can also be are byproducts of road salting, or maybe, you know, salting around your own driveway or steps and walkways, byproducts of septic systems, particularly chlorides. Elevated levels of chlorides could help to be an indication of that. And also for those of us who maybe live in a coastal area and the well is in close proximity to salt water, you know, storm surges, sea level rise, etc., can impact the salt content of the well water. So that's the every year test. Every 3 to 5 years, the Department of Health suggests doing things that are components of plumbing, okay, the corrosivity of the water, so items like pH, alkalinity, total dissolved solids are items that can cause the water to be corrosive, which then can have an effect on our plumbing. And depending on the type of metal that our plumbing is made out of, could then impact, you know, the level of those metals in our water. Older homes built prior to 1986 could have components of lead in them. Many of us may have copper plumbing. We may notice some, you know, blue-green staining around the home, which is an indication that copper is leaching. And ingesting those at elevated levels, you know, through drinking and cooking, could pose a problem. So having the water tested, knowing what the levels are very important. And then there are some naturally occurring items on this list that are also good to know about. Iron and manganese are on here. They're more of an aesthetic, naturally occurring item. They impart an odor. They can impart an odor. They can also impart color and staining to the well water. Fluoride is naturally occurring in areas of the state. If there's, you know, young children in the house, it's always good to have the fluoride tested. Share the results with your doctor and dentist. There are areas where we've seen slightly elevated levels of fluoride in well water, just based on fluoride deposits in the rock. And then every 5 to 10 years, the Department of Health suggests volatile organic compounds. These are items for which there are health standards set for. They're components of gasoline, hobby, paint products, paint thinners, hobby chemicals, etc. And they can also be byproducts if you live in an industrial area, or even near an old landfill, say, for example. So VOCs are every 5 to 10 years. The other thing about VOCs is that they often have an odor associated with them. People will often describe it as a chemically odor. Call me if that is your situation. And a scan for volatile organic compounds can help to discern if that's an issue or not. Next slide, please. There's a couple of naturally occurring items. Arsenic and beryllium are the two of them that should be tested for. Arsenic if you live near an orchard or where there was an orchard, and beryllium if you live in these communities, it would be prudent to test for. So arsenic is not naturally occurring in Rhode Island bedrock that we know of now, or although the Department of Health is doing some reconnaissance on that. Beryllium, arsenic is mostly from land use, okay, as was used as a fungicide in orchards. Beryllium is a naturally occurring heavy metal that exists in our bedrock in these communities. Next slide, please. So the Department of Health has a well testing viewer online that is helpful if you're scratching your head and saying, how do I know if I live near where an orchard used to be? Because now it's all residential development. Or how do I know if I'm living in East Greenwich, if I live in an area where there's beryllium, right? So this website here will take you to the private well viewer. You go online. It's much like Google Map. You type in your address. It will zoom into your, find that point on a map, and then it's color coded to discern, yes, test for arsenic, yes, test for beryllium, depending on the color. Okay. So you can find out for yourself. If you have any issues with it, just give me a phone call or send me an email, and I can do it for you in my office. Okay, so I can help you with that. Next slide, please. Other times to test: if the well was flooded, or if you notice a change in the color, taste, or smell of your well water, call me. Okay, I've worked with lots of homeowners. We'll talk about the change that you've noticed, and I'll make some suggestions for testing. Okay. Next slide, please. Testing should be done at a state certified lab. There's a list coming up about what are those state certified labs. You're going to call them and tell them what you want tested for. They specifically want to call during COVID-19 so they can also address safety practices and expectations about going to the lab in person. They'll put the kit together for you, as well as the instructions for collecting the sample. You'll go to the lab and pick that up. You'll bring it home. You'll carefully follow directions when collecting the sample, and take it back in the appropriate amount of time that the lab tells you. In the slide, I say 24 hours. That's typical, but just make sure it's the right span of time. The lab will then send you a copy of your results, either email or snail mail or both. If you have questions about your results, you can call the lab. Most of the labs will not do interpretation of results. they will send you to me to do that. So if you would like me to take a look at your results and have a conversation with you about what they mean, I'm happy to do that. I'm a licensed interpreter at by the Rhode Island Department of Health to offer that service. And so I'm happy to help you. Usually people will just forward me send me an email with their test results, and then we'll have a conversation. For a fee, some of the labs will come to the home, collect the sample, and take it back to the lab for testing for you. And so it just gives you a little bit of a convenience factor. Okay, next slide, please, Kate. Here's a list of the labs that are state certified labs that are convenient to Rhode Island private well owners. So what state certified means is that the laboratory is following accepted procedures for testing for the substances that they're certified to test for. Those are referred to as standard methods. And also by law, they're not allowed to sell treatment equipment. So there's no conflict of interest. They're just going to test your water and send you your results. And then the next steps are up to you. Okay, so these are the 5 labs that are convenient to Rhode Islanders. Our state certifies laboratories all across the country, but typically we're not going to go to California unless we're looking for a road trip, an excuse to drive out there. So anyway, next slide, please. And it does cost money. I'm going to quote these prices for the state health lab. The annual test at the state health lab costs $95. And if you do the 5 to 10, which was everything on that list that I shared with you earlier, that would cost $410 at the Rhode Island State Health Lab. The private labs maybe are more competitive with one another, so the prices will vary. I don't keep track of all the prices at all the other state certified labs, the private ones, but there's 6 on the list or 5 on the list, and if you're want to shop around, you can certainly call them or check their website because their pricing is on their website also. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the exception for private well testing. It is required that private well testing occur when a new well goes in or when when an existing home is being sold that has a well. Okay, so if I'm going to put a new well in at my house, the well goes in, and then it's required for me to have the well tested to do everything on that list that I shared with you earlier. Upon the sale of a home with a well, the way that the regulations work is that buyers are responsible for doing the testing, and sellers are responsible to disclose the results of any previous testing that occurred. And I've given you the website here that will outline these regulations in terms of required testing. I also have a tip sheet on my website that summarizes the regulations about testing when buying or selling a home. You'd find that right at the main page of my website, riwelltesting.org. So, two situations where testing is required. Okay, next slide. I'm just going to talk really briefly about treatment. I do talk on the phone at length with private well owners about test results and about treatment and how to shop for treatment. I always say that treatment follows testing. You need to know what it is that you want to address or fix before you actually go get the right tool to do the job that you need done, right? So you test at a state certified lab, and then you understand what the issues are, what types of water treatment, what kind of technology is it that will address your needs, and then go shopping for a system that will address those needs, okay? So just very briefly, there's two main categories of treatment. One is called a point of use, which you see on the right-hand side, an example on the right-hand side of the slide, which is a simple carbon filter that's installed at one single tap. Point of use being a single tap faucet, and that treatment system is only treating water from that faucet, okay? Um, there's also whole house treatment that's installed in the basement, and it is treating all of the water in the house after it leaves your pressure tank in the basement, before it moves through all of the plumbing and goes out into any tap or toilet or water using appliance that you have in your home. So that's whole house. And this particular slide on the bottom left-hand side is showing number one, which is a sediment filter, which is designed to just trap particles, sands, gravels that may be flowing through the bedrock and gets into the water, gets into your plumbing. That's super important. That is an important treatment device for your as a well owner, period. And then the other item there that's labeled as number two is a water softener that for softening the water, but also typically in Rhode Island is used for treating iron and manganese. Okay, next slide, please. So it's important for you to take the 4 steps, learn about your well, protecting it, keeping pollution away, properly using, storing, and disposing of household chemicals. Make sure any new well is properly sited, working with your contractor to do so, and sealing any unused well, decommissioning it, putting it out of service. Following the well testing schedule, and call or email us. We're here to help you. The homework that I've talked about is what I'd really like you to do, and this is a great time of year to do it because it's nice weather and it's nice to be outdoors, is to go to your wellhead, stand at your wellhead, make sure the well cap is securely on, and look around to see if there's any burrowing or digging around the wellhead where it may show signs of rodents or other kinds of critters getting into the well. I've worked with homeowners who will have bacteria in the well because they have ants getting into their well, or they have a hornet's nest in their well. And then when you're standing at your wellhead, just take a look, see what's happening 5 feet from the wellhead, a 5-foot diameter from the wellhead. See what's happening 10 feet. See what's happening 50 feet from the wellhead. Where are the cars parked? You know, where are the pets? Where do we treat lawns and gardens? Those kinds of questions to just take an inventory of what's happening in and around the wellhead. When it rains, and storm water flows down over your property, is there any ponding of surface water, of storm water in and around the well? So those are all important things to just get to know, you know, what's happening around the well and those kinds of things. And certainly call. Give me a call, send me an email if you have any questions. So with that, I think that's the end of the slides, Kate, and I'm happy to entertain any questions if there are some.
Oh, we've got questions. We've got good ones.
Do we?
We do. We do. We do. All right, let's see. So I'm going to start from the top. Are there any areas in southern New England where there is no underground water?
I don't know of any. I don't. I don't know why somebody, I'm not sure if there's any like backstory
Yeah.
behind that question or not. So, but you know, I don't know of any
Well,
areas.
so the follow-up from the same person was in the part of the state where I live, Little Compton, is
Oh,
considered to be a wet area.
Hmm.
i.e. there are standing ponds and such. Does this translate to more groundwater for wells?
Um, it does little, so the question is in Little Compton, does the, because there's standing water, does this translate to more water for wells?
Mm-hmm. It's like a
Yeah.
hydrology question,
Yeah.
just
So, I would say, it depends. Surface water and groundwater are definitely interconnected. Surface water can flow down into groundwater, as the water table drops. There may be flow from surface water down underground. It's just that hydraulic gradient that would occur as the water table, starts to lower, which we typically see like later in the summer. Um, Although I'm not quite sure what typical is anymore in terms of hydrology and that kind of thing, rainfall events and stuff. So we can see surface water flowing into the groundwater. We can also see groundwater discharge into surface water as that water table rises up and intercepts the surface of the earth as it starts, which we see when water levels are high in our wetlands, typically this time of year. You can have groundwater discharge into the surface. So there's this, play of between groundwater and surface water. Little Compton also has areas of sand and gravel deposits, which I talked about throughout a little bit throughout the presentation. And so sand and gravel deposits, as I said earlier, um, can store a lot of water just because they have a high porosity rate, and they can also transmit that groundwater to a water supply well. So in those areas of sand and gravel, that's where we tend to see shallower wells. We saw with shallower, we saw a higher yield with, a shallow well in sand and gravel. And so you can, so you do have that in areas of Little Compton, sand and gravel deposits, as well as throughout southern Rhode Island.
great. How does using weed killers like Roundup affect my well water?
So Roundup, weed killers can affect groundwater quality, because if they're, I'm not going to say they do, there's absolutes here, but there's that potential for them to get into the groundwater um, through application, and then, so timing of the application, if you go out and apply it, and then, later that day we get a big rainstorm and the product then, gets dissolved by the rain, and there's some groundwater recharge and the movement of that product down into the groundwater. If the use of the product is close to the wellhead, and I'm talking like a 50-foot, 75-foot diameter radius, within the wellhead. So if you can keep that product as far as away, and I'm talking about Roundup, but I'm also talking about, fertilizers, pesticides. How do you take care of your motorized equipment? Where do you change the oil in your car? Anything that's potentially hazardous done close to the wellhead has the has greater potential to affect your well water quality than if it's done further away from the wellhead, if that makes sense for folks. Um, and, there may be non-chemical alternatives to Roundup that you can practice and minimize your use of those kinds of products in and around the home. And
Yeah,
that
I'll
would
put a,
be,
yeah,
that's probably something that I'm going to assume Kate could address and or has programs around that kind of thing via master gardeners and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll put a link to a plan identification sheet we have just to the Roundup question, which is generally used to control herbaceous weeds. We have this really cool resource that I'll post in the chat for you all, that actually tells you why the weeds you have are showing up. For example, if you have moss, most likely your soil is compacted. So instead of spraying something to get rid of the moss, you can actually core aerate, and that'll help get some airflow in your soil and prevent the moss from growing. But that is a bit of an aside. Allison, if there's a well near a forest edge, do you have any suggestions, or can you comment on the need to prune or trim trees and shrubs that are encroaching on, I assume, the well cap?
So I don't have a visual of how dense that is. But I would start with going out and inspecting it. So at my home, my well is on the edge of a forest also. And but the front of it is an open area so that I can see it, I can walk over to it, I can check it out and make sure, the well cap is on tight. And it's sparse enough that there's, nothing's gonna, no nests are gonna, no birds are gonna nest there, no rodents are gonna build a nest because it's open enough, right? And so if it's, there can be things around it, there may be blueberry bushes or what have you, but you just don't want it so dense that it would, that rodents and or birds would find safety nesting near the wellhead because they could scratch, right? Like turkeys, I've got turkeys nesting in my yard and they scratch quite a bit. And I don't want them scratching around my wellhead. So, if you want to talk more about this, you might want to you could send me a photo of it and we could have a conversation if you need more detail based on what I just said. But you just don't want it covered. You don't want stuff to feel safe nesting or living on your well right there.
I think it's so funny that all wells were covered with like little houses. Like I grew up, in the woods of Rhode Island, and all my friends and we had a little well house cover, and it was like a special place where fairies went. And now I learn at almost age 40 that you're not supposed to have one of those houses on top of your well. My mind is blown. Oh, I have
Well,
a
let's
bunch of,
put it this
yeah,
way. If you do have one of those and you just love it because fairies live there, I'd go visit the fairies every once in a while and just peek under and make sure there's nothing, there's no hornets building a nest, there's no ants digging or, making
mhm.
a big ant nest under there or anything like that. I just do a little inspection.
Fairy chipmunks. Yeah, things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah. Check it
Um,
out. Towhees.
oh, that would be cool, but not so much near your well. Okay, we have a few more. If our friend here, Jennifer, has hard water, should she just get a filtration system? They always have green stains in the shower.
Yeah, so typically green staining is indication that the water is corrosive, Jennifer, and anybody else who might have that. And so what's used to correct that is a neutralizing filter. Um, and it's always best to have water test results. One, so you know what needs to be corrected and what the levels are pre-treatment. You can share those water test results with a treatment professional to help design a system to address your needs. And then you have some like what I call raw water tests. So then when a treatment system goes in and you do some follow-up testing, it will help you to discern whether or not the treatment system is doing what it's supposed to be doing. I have information about these kinds of treatment systems on my webpage, and we can also have a conversation, or you can send me an email, and I can send you direct links and things like that. Okay, so let me know if you need any help on that.
That's great. Let's see. What are your thoughts on a whole house water softener? Typically, I see a salt-based system, but they're concerned with the discharge going into the septic or going onto the ground or dry well.
hmm So the best practice for whole house softening is the dry well discharge, and that's what they don't want you putting it into the septic system. They, meaning Department of Environmental Management, has best practices around that. It can cause your septic system to not work correctly and could be another big expense. Um, so typically, softening if you need it. Typically, softeners are used in Rhode Island for not because we have hard water, but because they also help to remove iron and manganese, which are two, naturally occurring minerals that exist in our bedrock. They're not a health concern, they're aesthetic, they cause staining. So if you can, quote unquote, live with it, and it's not so bad that, it's not imparting an odor or causing all kinds of stains, you might consider living with it. The alternative to a softener in terms of treating iron and manganese, if that's what the concern is here, is aeration, where you aerate the water, the iron and manganese come out of solution, and then they become solids that are disposed of. Aeration is more expensive treatment technology than softening. So that's why softening is typically used. But if you see on my website, I have a tip sheet on iron and manganese, and I have treatment technologies listed in there that help to remove iron and manganese. And again, happy to talk more about this.
How about chlorinating your own well? Do you do it? And if so, how often and how?
So chlorination, or what I would call disinfection, is done when bacteria, through a test, bacteria are present in the well. So when you have a test for bacteria in well water, the results come back present or absent. Doesn't matter how many, they're either there or they're not. And if they're there, you disinfect. Um, I have had the good fortune to not have to disinfect my well. I've not had bacteria in my well. Thank you, well driller. Um, but I do have the instructions on how to do it. I'm happy, very detailed instructions. The instructions on the web page are more abbreviated. I'm happy to email you a copy of those detailed instructions. I've worked with many homeowners who are do-it-yourselfers and will do it themselves, or at least you can educate yourself and read the instructions. And then if you hire a contractor to do the disinfection for you, you'll know what to expect. Okay, so yeah, lots of people do it themselves if you are comfortable with that.
It's good to know. Do you recommend testing well water for radon? If so, do the authorized labs perform that test? These are
Oh,
good
good.
questions, folks.
Yeah, excellent question. I do have a tip sheet on radon on my webpage. So there's no drinking water standard for radon in well water. So that means there is a drinking water standard for radon in air, and radon does exist in Rhode Island. Many of us already know this. Um, so this is the recommended practice. Have your indoor air tested. If the level is elevated and the standard for radon in air is 4 picocuries per liter, are the units of measurement, and you're gonna treat for air, before you treat for air, have the water tested, because the radon in the water, when you turn on the faucet, take a shower, run the dishwasher, the washing machine, if there's radon in the water, it gets released through agitation, using it and getting released into the air, and it can increase the concentration of radon in the air from gassing off in the water. And that's all explained in my tip sheet, as well as treatment technologies for radon, which the only one honestly, that we suggest is aeration, so that there's no hazardous waste disposal issues for homeowners to deal with.
Hmm. That's great. Is a dug well, say 30 feet deep, likely to contaminate a deep drilled well that is 150 feet deep?
Nope, not likely.
Okay.
No, no, yeah, no.
Okay. And how does one determine a location for a new well on a recently purchased lot? That's a
Oh
loaded
yeah,
question.
that's a super good question. Um, work with a well driller. Call around, these well drillers this would be my best recommendation practice. Um, And again, I can help you with a list around that, or you can call the Department of Business Regulation or look on their website and call around to a few different contractors, like anything that you might do in around the home and spend a lot of money on, right? You're going to get 2 or 3 quotes, maybe even 4 if you don't like 3. Um, and have people have the contractors come out. They'll walk the land. Many of these people have been in business for a long time. Find somebody who has drilled in your area and can talk intelligently about where he or she would locate the well. That's how I did it when we were putting a well in at our house. And uh, I worked with a well contractor who works who had put wells in the area that I live in. So have a few people come out and walk the property with you.
Certainly a big decision. So, all right, just let's see, two more. Do you
Okay.
recommend that a professional maintain the well filter systems, or can a homeowner do it?
Well, that's up to you. And it depends
Hmm.
on the system that you have, right? And the kind of maintenance that it entails. Some people want a maintenance contract and, I have some, that's in one of the tip sheets on the web page about, need to buy treatment, you know, here are some questions to ask when purchasing water treatment equipment. Some treatment like that cartridge filter that I mentioned is fairly easy maintenance, right? You turn the water off, you take the cartridge off, you take the spent filter out, you put a new filter in. It's a fairly easy fix in terms of doing it. It just requires a special wrench to get that filter off. But and other things may be more complicated. So it's just going to depend on what the maintenance requirements are and what you feel comfortable with. I've worked with homeowners, the whole spectrum of people who are doing it themselves and others who have somebody come by and do the maintenance for them. They have a contract.
Hmm. All right. There's a couple questions about other states. So someone asked if there are labs that Massachusetts residents should contact. And then someone else asked about your role in Connecticut. They said, is it a safe assumption that Connecticut has a similar type of office as yours to work with when we test our well water, and our Connecticut labs certified like they are in Rhode Island?
Yes, Connecticut labs are certified as they are in Rhode Island. And in Connecticut, call your Connecticut Department of Health or even just Google them. I've been on their webpage too because sometimes somebody will be close to Connecticut or a Connecticut person will call me. You can call me, I don't mind working across state lines, but I would refer you to your Connecticut Department of Health, and that's where I would go to get the information to help answer your questions. Um, what was the thing about Massachusetts, Kate?
Just if there's a list, I think it's in the spirit of the question
Yes.
about Connecticut, which labs should folks lean on?
Yeah, again, state certified laboratories are what I suggest. In Massachusetts, you have local boards of health, and one of their responsibilities is well water. And so, you could even just go on your town website and get your health agent in Massachusetts, and give them a call. There may be, I've done some work on Cape Cod, and I know that out there's a county, Barnstable County Health Department, and they also have a Barnstable County testing lab, and they do well water testing. I don't know where this person is located, but there may be a county health lab nearby. But your health agent will be able to help, should be able to help you around that.
Yeah, I guess that's a good take home that the Department of Health, whether there's an extension program at a university or not, the Department of Health has to address healthy well water, right? That's the role.
Yeah, and in Massachusetts, I believe it depends, but I believe it might be the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection that
Okay.
that develops regulations around wells, but it is the county. So anyway, yeah.
Great. All right, I lied. There's one more because this is a
Okay.
good one. And then Allison, I'm going to send you all of these beautiful comments that people are sending in about your talk and how helpful it's been. It's really nice,
Oh,
folks. Thank you
thank
for
you. I'm
sharing. Yeah, there's some
happy
really
to
nice
do it.
stuff.
Happy to do it.
Um, so last but not least, our friend bought a home in Southern Maryland. It's an old house with a well, but there's no wellhead. They can't locate the exact location of the well, but it passed all the testing. Have you ever heard of a well not having a pipe above ground?
Yes.
1967.
Yeah, yeah, it happens. You're not alone. So, it happens. And, I'm not sure of the Maryland regulations, if there's well completion reports, and what did we say, 67,
Yep.
1967? So, well completion reports maybe didn't even exist back then. It might be hard to find who the well driller was, even if, yeah. Um, it can be located if you're, interested in doing that. Again, I would do a little reconnaissance either with the Maryland Department of Health, call your town where you bought the property and ask them how you might go about locating this and which agency would be the best to work with. Metal detector, if you have one or know somebody who has one and can get your hands on one, may be very helpful. You can follow the water line, at least you'd know what side of the house to look on because you could see where the water line is coming into the house. And that kind of stuff. Discern what you can find as well components in the basement to help discern, where the water line is coming into the home. Where the pressure tank is. Usually it's all on the same side of the basement. I'm assuming the house has a basement that the water line is coming into. So
Mm.
that could be of help, and a metal detector might be able to help you with that.
That sounds like a fun weekend project.
Hide
Well,
and
we'll leave
seek.
it there where this was great. I'm going to send you all these wonderful comments. Thank you, everyone who is here
Thank
live
you, everyone.
for
Yeah.
sticking with us with our, our friend and foe technology. But Allison, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see
You're
you
welcome.
always. And
Oh,
folks, oh,
wait, before we go, I want to
okay.
say one thing. Thank you for popping in there, Joe, right? So Joe's going to send out an email with to everybody who was present with the slide presentation. He's also going to send an email with a link to for people to go online if you would like to order a well test kit from the Rhode Island Department of Health. Okay, and this is going to be particularly for people who live down here near URI, and the convenience factor of coming to URI to pick up a test kit versus going, to Providence to pick all the way to Providence to pick up a test kit. So you'll get a link with the and it will be very clear in Joe's email to click here to order a kit. It'll take you to an online form. You're going to put your name, and Joe, do you want to take over and tell people the information that we need from them?
Sure. Yeah. So the form is pretty straightforward. You just put in your name and your email, phone number, that kind of thing, and then at the end of the form, it specifies there's like a multiple select for the different types of kits. So we have the every year, the 3 to 5, and then the 10-year. And so you can order either one kit or you can select multiple kits if you need multiple. And then there's also an other button, so you can select other if you need more than one of a single type of kit, and then just specify which kit and how many that you need. So we can really fill any need that you have with the different testing kits. And then once you fill the form out, we're gonna cut the form off, I believe Thursday morning, we were discussing, so that we can then order the kits. But then once we have your information, we can follow up and let you know directions for picking them up and things like that.
Yeah, they'll be available here at URI. So once you order the kit, and we close the kit ordering, as Joe mentioned, on Thursday morning, so strike while the iron's hot. You don't have to use it Friday morning, but you might just want to have it on hand. Then we have to order from the health department, state health lab. They need to put the kits together. We need to go pick them up. And then once we get them, which will probably be within a week or so, depending on how busy the lab is, Joe will send you out an email and let you know that the kit is ready for you to come and pick up. It will be contactless pickup. We'll put it in a outdoor space that we will give you very specific directions to find. It's super easy. We've done this multiple times. You just drive up, you pick up your kit, and it's contactless. So we're doing it as safe as we possibly can. Then you take it home, you take your sample, and you will return it to the Department of Health lab. So we're not going to collect the kits and take them, but you will return it yourself, and we'll just give a little bit more convenience to you. Okay?
Perfect.
Okay, that's all.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to
Thank
see
you,
you, Joe.
everybody. Good night.
Good night. Good
Thanks, you
night.
too.